Hello, welcome back to a rather pleasant autumnal day in Somerset. So I thought I'd chat to you as I'm walking around my normal route a little bit more about being in a band. So I'm entitling this set of videos, or this long form video, whatever it's going to end up being, as the truth of being about being in a band part 2. Now, as a kind of caveat about this conversation, I'll just point out that, you know, these are my own views, these are my experiences, and obviously I'm a man in my 50s, but I have been in this business for a long time, since I was essentially 17, 18 years old. I'm now 50, well, about to be 56, and so I do believe that experience counts for an awful lot. And the things that I've seen through my life as a professional musician and someone that's had a level of success with record labels, touring, all the trappings, I think, you know, that does put me in a decent position to comment about the way that the music business has been, where it's going, and how that might impact upon those that are seeking to forge a career in the new music business, modern music business. So the things I'm most interested about, and I'm going to touch upon this probably not just in this video, and a lot of these things, let's just get this out of the way, a lot of these things will not mean anything to you if you're watching, you're in a band, or you're a musician, you know, with a, I don't know what degree of interest you may have, but if you're interested in making music and trying to make it commercial and sell music to an audience, it's obviously different for everybody, and circumstances are different, of course. So just to say that, you know, maybe some of the stuff that I talk about today you may think isn't pertinent to you, but this is just kind of general overview. But what I'm really interested about, and like I say, we'll cross over into other conversations, is the actual reality of trying to make a long-term career as a musician, specifically in a band, because that's what I've mainly experienced, and how maybe some of this information might help you. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is the actual origins of why you want to be in a band. Now, I've produced a lot of records as a record producer as well as being a performer. And a lot of my time when I'm in the studio, especially with young bands, because I've focused on young bands a lot of the time, one of the very first questions I ask a young band when I get them in the studio is, well, the first thing I tend to do is get a band set up, you know, that's just, and I qualify this, I don't work with bands unless they've been recommended, or I've been recommended to them. They've got a certain level of possible stature, you know, i.e. they're further up the ladder than perhaps some others. But also, and the most important thing, is I've got to really get the music. Actually, everything else pales into comparison next to my feeling about the music that I'm being presented with, of a band or a musician that I want to work with. It's really essentially the only thing that I care about. So yes, when I get a band, when I start working with a band and I get them in the studio, often the first day is the most exciting day. Everyone's joyful. We're in a professional recording situation. I specifically use a studio called Vale Studios in Gloucestershire, which is absolutely, Worcestershire. Old grey matter problems there. Worcestershire, which is absolutely brilliant. It's a residential place. The guy that runs it, Chris, is a wonderful studio owner and also a brilliant engineer. So we've worked together on a lot of records, and I've lost count of the amount of recording sessions I've done there. So I know when I'm going in the studio with a young band that the excitement that's contained within that first 24 hours is really important. And I make it my sort of raison d'etre, if you like, to make sure that everyone within that first day feels comfortable and we get set up and everyone feels they're having a great time and we're going to be productive, because studios can be daunting places. there's a huge difference between making demos in your local studio, which is everything everybody does. I did that. Little Angels did it. We worked in many little tiny studios, you know, in and around North Yorkshire back in the day, so I know exactly how that feels. But there is a big difference between stepping out of that environment and into a professional recording setup. Now, what I'll probably do is I'll probably concentrate on the recording process at a later stage in another different video, because I want to talk about, I think really what this set of videos this video is about is some of the pitfalls. Actually, I think really when I think about it, it's like trying to avoid some of the most common problems. So when I get a band in the studio and I've got them set up, what I tend to do is get everyone happy, get the mood set, get the mic set. We spend time getting the sounds, of course, all that sort of thing. And because my particular style of production is very much a kind of performance capture based thing, meaning I try to avoid editing as much as possible. That's not where I came from. I came from being, you know, working with serious producers who expected you to be able to play rather than relying upon the technology. So I guess this is the first pitfall I want to talk about. There's two contained in this conversation, really. So we'll talk about the first one. So I will then record the band pretty much as live as possible. Do 2 or 3 takes, get everyone set up and feeling good. Make sure the arrangement, you know, by this point, I would imagine we've gone through some pre-production. I like to do a lot of pre-production, 2-3 weeks sometimes, or as much as we possibly can humanly manage, to make sure that the arrangements and the songs are in good shape, and make an A and a B list and all that sort of thing. So I'll record, say, the first song half a dozen times, and then I will get everyone back in the studio, into the control room. Without saying anything, I will press play. And I can guarantee you 9 times out of 10, in fact I would say pretty much 10 times out of 10, faces drop. Everyone gets concerned. All of a sudden there's this realization that the sound that they thought they were making through volume and the sort of energy of being in a room with each other when you're in the rehearsal room bears no relationship whatsoever to what's coming out speakers when I've recorded it. And this is a really important moment, because what it is the penny drops. If the band are smart, the penny drops. And we have to have that conversation about why it doesn't sound fantastic. And let me tell you this is a secret. No amount of overdubbing, no amount of studio trickery, editing, you know, effects will ever make up for the fact that maybe a song ain't good enough, or perhaps the quality of the playing ain't up to scratch. Now, of course, this is very subjective. There are some amazing recordings made by musicians that aren't great players, that have changed the world, of course. But therein lies the rub here. If that happens and it sounds and feels fantastic, then hey, all good. Let's carry on exactly as we are. Let's all be powerful and let's not be worried about that sort of stuff. Let's just get on with it. But if the opposite is true, which most of the times it is, that really the material is not up to scratch, or a combination of that and the playing ain't great, then there has to be some strong conversations. And these are the moments of realization. This is the clarity comes in. This is where people start to realize the actual reality of making serious music. And so I've often sort of enjoyed that moment the most, because you can see then the determination on the artists and the bands that really want to do it, because they go, okay, well, what do we do to make this better? How do we go forward from here? And so those conversations then promote and prompt the serious need to really look at the nuts and bolts of this next question. Why do you want to be in a band in the first place? Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. That's a big question, isn't it? Why do I want to be in a band in the first place? Well, you know, we all do this for all kinds of different reasons. Inevitably, I would imagine, in our apprenticeship, what I call our early apprenticeship, when we're all at school or sixth form or whatever, you want to, you know, you meet a group of like-minded people and you want to get in a room and make a racket because you all like the same kinds of music. You all listen to the same sorts of records. You've got opinions about it. You love that guitar player, you love that drummer. You want to be that guitar player, you want to be that singer, etc. You want to be that bass player, whatever. And of course, that's absolutely relevant. That's the beautiful thing about wanting to be in a band and make music, is that it's inspired by the feeling of wanting to do it. That is the absolute driving force. I just want to do it. You don't need to have to answer those questions at this particular stage, because all you're really doing is scratching the surface, getting used to the concept, trying to find a place to work from where you can get up every day and think about nothing else, because that's what it has to be like. So in the early doors of being in a band, no problem. Make as much racket as you want. Go into the garage, find a scout hut, you know, whatever you have to do to rehearse, do it and enjoy it. The difficulty comes when we start to reach a point, and I'm sure some of you will recognise this, where you feel, say like you're the driving force, you've got that urge, you've got that mounting, bubbling feeling of having to do this, that you will inevitably come up against resistance from others in that embryonic band, you know, in that apprenticeship band. And so decisions then have to be made. And here, I think, this is probably my first point of where I would say that this is a mistake that is made. And it isn't a mistake, it's the wrong word to say mistake. But I think in reality, it is a mistake. Choosing the right people to work with. This is really important, and this can be something that can be enormously emotionally difficult. Because if you've got really friendly with someone and you've been in your garage band with them for a long time, say a couple of years when you're from school, but you've advanced, you've got a greater sense of what you want to do, but the other guy, your best mate, really isn't feeling it. He wants to go to university, he's got a girlfriend, he spends, you know, he keeps cancelling rehearsals because he can't get there because he's got to do this, to do that, but you're getting frustrated. Well, here is a wake-up call. This is the first mistake that most bands make. You settle for second best. And I mean that with the greatest respect to everybody concerned. But if you genuinely really want to make it, if you genuinely want to give yourself the best possible chance to have a career in the music business, you cannot afford to work with people that are going to, you know, halt the proceedings, stop it from happening because of all these normal domestic things, you know. So I would say that's the first thing. If you have that desire, if you are the one that feels you've got something to say, that you really have a feeling for the music and you think you've got something unique and special and different, make sure you work with the right people that feel the same. So what does that really mean then? Well, you've got to go on the search. You know, and actually, there are so many great players out there today. This is one thing that seems to be hugely different from my day when I was a teenager, is that there are so many young people out there that are getting fantastic at instruments very early on, a lot quicker than I ever did. I mean, I'm a useless guitar player. I could never find the energy to learn to play the guitar. That's why I ended up being a songwriter, because that ended up being my thing, and being a singer. But that's okay, you know, you just have to find your place. But I am constantly astounded by the level of ability that I see on Facebook, you know, across social media, of young people being stellar at playing their instruments. Now, here's the second mistake that you need to understand, and this is really important. Just because somebody is fantastic at playing an instrument does not make them the right person to be in a band with. So much about this is about personality. It's how you interact with each other, how you can spark off each other. It's no good having a prima donna guitar player who all he wants to do is play solos when you're in a rehearsal room and you're trying to write a song and you're trying to get that song arranged, and that guitar player, all they're trying to do is force themselves into the song for no other reason apart from just playing the guitar to be arrogant, to demonstrate themselves, to give themselves a platform. Being in a band is about camaraderie. I've said this before. Again, this crosses over onto stuff I've been talking about in the last set of videos. Right, well, just excuse me as I navigate this muddy pathway here. It's been raining a lot, but that's all good. I don't mind it. I like it. So yeah, this is a really important point. Really important point. More important than anything to do with how good you are at playing an instrument. It's how well you get on with people, and how well, more than that, deeper than that, much deeper than that. The fact that they understand and chime and agree with the things that you are trying to do, or a group of you are trying to do. That's infinitely more important. You need to find people that can occupy the same universe, the same concept, have the same views on life, have the same views on what the music means, on what you want to try and do with the music. Because if you don't have that, I can tell you now, you'll be treading water for years. It'll become frustrating. You'll get to the end of the process where you've just hit brick walls. Because why? Well, because the music isn't connecting, isn't communicating. And I'll guarantee you, the vast majority of the reason why that is, probably the only reason why that music isn't connecting, is because you haven't found the right people to bring that music alive. I mean, one of the common things that I found in bands where they may be great players, I've had bands in the studio that play fantastically well and have got everything they need in terms of the quality of their playing. But the biggest stumbling block, and something they don't spot themselves, is if they start to argue about a very simple point, about what a song means, what a title, and what the narrative content of that song is, what the energy of the song is trying to represent, what it's trying to demonstrate, how it's trying to demonstrate the band and the music. If there's arguments about that stuff, fundamental arguments, you know, about the very energy of it, it's all I can say, it's hard to put into words, then you've got a serious problem. The best situations I've ever been in my life, and I'll name a band, the Virgin Marries from Macclesfield. There was never, ever, not even the merest hint of disillusionment about stuff that Ali was writing, for instance, from Danny, you know, or from Matt. They were one. It was this collective energy that was unspoken. They fully believed it. It was not even in contention. There was no conversations to the alternative. There was nothing that ever felt grating. They knew what they wanted to be. The songs that Ali, who was the leader of the band, songwriter, main songwriter, he had an innate understanding of himself and had gathered this fantastic group of people. Okay, they were a three-piece at the time, but I was most impressed with that. I was expecting, like I had seen many times before, a group of young men, you know, who were all great players. I'd seen them play live and I was blown away by what they did, but playing live is totally different from being in the studio, of course, like I've said. But they really did encapsulate or capture everything that they needed. They were and have and remain the best example of a truly authentic bunch of guys. So yeah, that's a very important thing. Find the right people. It might take you some time. In actual fact, when you're young, you've got loads of time. This is one of the biggest mistakes. I think another mistake, I would say, again, I hate the word mistake, but maybe a kind of trip up, is that time is on your side. There is no clock. Don't believe that you're, we've been playing for 2 years, 3 years, nothing's happening for us, it's all over. Bands fail when they split up. It's a simple thing, because there is so much energy needed to keep a band going, isn't there? So much that you have to dig into, so much you have to reach into yourself to find the energy to carry on going. Now, it's not so bad when you're living at home and you're at school, or you're at sixth form, or even at university, when you can find the time between everything else, because you don't have the responsibility to paying the rent or a gas bill or whatever else. You can find that time to indulge, because it is an indulgence. Absolutely, it's an indulgence. A very important indulgence if you have something to say. So it's crucial that you spend that entrepreneurial period, if you like, when you're being an apprentice. You're still being entrepreneurial because you're trying to find your way forward. You're making moves. You're trying to find the right people. You're trying to get that rehearsal room. You're trying to buy that right guitar. You're trying to save up for the van or whatever you're going to do. All these things are really, really important, and they all work in concert with each other. But I do think that is a major stumbling block, is don't think that the time is against you. It isn't. There is no time limit. One of the great things that's come out of the modern music business is that seemingly, as far as I can gather, oh, hang on, there's a car coming. Sorry about that. Yeah, picking it up. And one of the things that I think is fantastic about the modern, music business, if you like, because a lot of the modern music business exists in the social media. In fact, a vast majority of it does. I'm not talking about record deals. I'm talking about how you operate as a band and how you use the tools at your disposal to bring your band forward and your music forward. But there doesn't seem to be anywhere near as much ageism as it used to be. Now, I put this down to the fact that there was very little outlets back in the night when I was, coming through in the sort of mid-80s through to the early 90s. There was only 2 or 3 magazines. If you were a rock band, you were lucky if you got in Kerrang or Metal Hammer, etc. And so the sort of presented concept of all that was that it was a young person's game. Now, of course, really in reality, it is a young person's game. If you don't get on your game when you're in your teens, then you really haven't got any chance. But what I mean is that because of the way that social media works now and the fact that the platforms that we have available to us and the releasing mechanisms, anyone can put music out now, as we know. All of those things can combine into being a really long roadmap. It might be long in terms of time, but what you're really doing is you're learning every step of the way, and having to make very, very strong, informed decisions, especially if your feeling is about truly having a career as a musician. So let me just pick that point up about having a career as a musician, because I do think we need to separate this. It is absolutely fine to want to just, like I say, be in a garage band and have some fun. Absolutely no problem at all. It's the lifeblood of doing it. But like I say, you reach a point where you have to make that decision to move forward. And like we've been discussing in this conversation, a lot of it's about making the right decisions with regard to the people that you work with, and not putting a time limit on yourselves, working hard. But there's lots of other nuts and bolts that are associated with this. Okay, so let's get on to some of what I see as the stumbling blocks of the modern approach to being in a band, okay? One of the first things I've noticed a lot of is the lack of interest in rehearsing. Now, I don't understand this at all, because a massive part of the reason why I wanted to be in a band was to be with my mates. I've discussed this in the last, conversation that we had about the truth of being in a band. Well, it still stands. A huge 90% of it, more probably, of the reasons why a band works is the camaraderie, like I keep saying. So the nuts and bolts of that is you have to lay down a line in the sand that you do not go back over. And that to me is you have to rehearse. You have to put proper time in. And I'm not just talking about doing an hour or two in the local rehearsal room and then going to the pub and getting drunk and talking about how amazing you are, because that's what happens a lot, it seems to me. I've experienced this, first hand as a producer, doing pre-production with bands, and you do 5 minutes and they want to stop, hang on, there's the truck coming. But yeah, that was a close call. Scaffold truck. Anyway, so yeah, rehearsing is really important, and it does a number of things. It's a fundamental, if you think about the sort of being in a band, I'd say it's the nut and the bolt is rehearsing, because lots of things happen. It's not just the camaraderie of being in the room, it's the fact that you physically have to get there. It's the fact you have to set up equipment. It's the fact you start to understand how the sound in the room works with the band over a long period of time. It doesn't just happen in 6 months and 1 rehearsal a week. You have to make mistakes, get it wrong, have to change your rehearsal room, fundamentally move your own personal schedule around so you can make the rehearsals happen. And I would say, arguably, that if you really, really want to make it in a band, no matter what the genre is at all, I think you've got to be rehearsing 4 or 5 times a week, minimum. And those rehearsals have to be several hours, because it takes a long time to get into that rehearsal mode, to dig in, to bed in, to start to unpick everything that you're doing. And interestingly, because we all get excited about the first moment we turn the guitars on and everything's loud in the room, quite often what we can do is we can pat ourselves on the back far too quickly. When really what you should be doing is picking those songs apart, examining it all, going back over why things aren't working, and crucially making decisions about getting rid of stuff. Here's the big thing, biggest mistake, one of the biggest mistakes you can make as a band is just putting up with the material that ain't that good. So this brings me on to one of the next biggest stumbling blocks, assuming that volume in a room equates to power and energy. It doesn't. you know, some of the best bands in the world rehearse very quietly. There's lots of bands that when they're rehearsing for a tour will do quiet rehearsals because you can hear the details of the songs, you can hear the details of the arrangements. So it's fundamental that you understand that it's not to do with volume and how loud your amplifier is or how loud the drummer plays, because that all sounds great. We all sound great at that level of volume. The important thing is to start to recognise what songs are really working, which ones are actually transmitting and communicating the message that you really want to communicate, and being really tough on yourself and making proper decisions about what stays and what goes. I have a rule when I'm working on my material these days, have done for a long time now. I give myself 20 minutes from the start of an idea in a rehearsal room with a band to see whether that idea comes into fruition and starts to become something. If you're still working on it an hour later, forget it. Now I know what you're saying. You're saying, well, it's easy for you, you know, blah, blah, blah. But what I mean by this is that it's self-analysis, it's self-regulation. It's just like any job. You've got to treat this like a job. You know, I mean, it's hard to do that because, of course, it's vocational. We're trying to have fun, aren't we? We're trying to go into a rehearsal room and have a nice time and all the rest of it. But I guess what I'm trying to say is if you reach the point where it ceases to just be having some fun and you really feel fervently obsessed by it, where you cannot think about anything else, where you go to bed, I've said this before, go to bed thinking about being in a band, wake up thinking about being in a band. If that is the way that you feel, you have to treat it with deadly seriousness. So I guess the next obvious one to talk about is doing gigs. Now, again, I found this sort of astounding when I've had conversations with bands that, you know, are presenting themselves as serious acts, that when I talk to them about what their following's like locally, 9 times out of 10 there's a kind of, well, we don't really play, we don't really do gigs. And I just think this is, I don't know whether this is a result of, I think it is a result of modernity and social media, that, you know, if you have a great looking website and you wear the right clothes and you have some decent photographs taken and you know, the website has all the information on it and you've got some, you know, music on there where it's through whatever platform, that somehow that's enough. Well, let me tell you, it really isn't enough. To truly call yourself a band, you have to be a working band. The single reason why I wanted to be in a band was to go out and play some shows, to show off, to demonstrate myself, to give myself a platform to talk about the things I wanted to talk about. So if your modus operandi is, oh, well, we don't really do gigs, we just do them when we really think they're necessary, we're a studio band, you might as well give it up. Because apart from anything else, commercially and from a financial point of view, if you're going to go on the road, the only thing that's going to support you is by playing a show and selling some merchandise. No one's buying music as such. And if you've got a little local following, you're going to sell 50 records. You know, you're not going to sell proper numbers. People aren't buying records anymore, as we know. So it's obviously going into streaming, etc. Now, there's a caveat with this, is that I do believe that recorded music in physical format is still really important. And I think for new bands that are starting up, it's part of the lifeblood. Because if your fans really love what you do and they're following you and they're supporting you, they will buy your material. They will buy it on vinyl. They will buy it on cassette. You know, I know that's been a thing recently. And they will buy it on CD still. Or at the very least, they will buy a t-shirt and some merchandise, you know, to support you. Because they know that that's what you're trying to do. So it's all about the endeavour. How much you put into it is how much you get back out of it. You know, if you sit around in your bedrooms talking about being in a band, that's all you'll do for the next 3 or 4 years until you become totally disillusioned that no one's found you or no one's discovered you. You have to get out there and take it out there. So it's absolutely fundamental that you put loads of your effort into finding local shows. I mean, even when Little Angels were a young band, we used to play anything. We would play school halls. We were asked to play in the lunch times in school halls. We would go out and play tiny little gigs in pubs, as all bands should do. We used to make ourselves look ridiculous half the time in the stuff we were wearing, but we absolutely fundamentally knew that the need to play outweighed absolutely everything. I actually find it quite amazing that I actually have to say this, but I have witnessed this. I have witnessed this reality. I mean, I had a band a few years ago now, that when I was running a consultation business with my partner, Rob, my business partner, Rob, and we talked to a band who insisted that they were a festival band and that was it. They were only going to play festivals. And I said, well, who would book you to play a festival? Oh, we won a competition to play Download. We won a competition to play Bloodstock. And I said, well, absolutely fantastic, but what about a local following? What about building? Oh no, we don't do that. We do 1 or 2 shows a year, and they're really big shows. Now, this band were unknown. I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing. And you know what, even if they were right and I was totally wrong, right? And they built this idea, and people have got this brilliant idea that was what they were, then it still doesn't answer the question as how they're going to get better and how they're going to improve their live playing and how they're going to improve their live shows. It's a fundamental problem. So yes, that is strangely one of the big stumbling blocks I've noticed. You have to get out and play. Make every effort to do that. Every time you do a show, you improve, even if it's an absolute disaster. In fact, actually having massive disasters where the gear falls off the stage, or you bust all your strings, or you just play badly, it's a huge learning curve, and it goes into the understanding of what you need to do to improve and get it better and make it better. So I think, you know, that is something that you really, really need to focus on. I'm sure there's a lot of people shouting at the screen going, well, we do that anyway, we do loads of shows. But I would say the next stumbling block is, don't become a big fish in a small pond. Now, what I mean by that is, and again, you're probably thinking, oh, goodness me, what else do we have to do? Well, there's loads of things you have to do. You've got to live and breathe it. And one of the big things you do need to do is you need to separate the local following, where you become local heroes, from the actual reality of becoming something on a grander scale. Now, it doesn't have to be much initially, but you do need to get out of your cordon. You do need to stop just playing the same pubs, because it's comfortable, isn't it? I mean, I know a lot of bands that just play the same places over and over again around the local region. Now, that's fine if all you're doing is, again, getting back to this whole fun thing. It's absolutely fine just to have fun. Of course it is. Brilliant. In actual fact, it's probably the best it'll ever be. But if you genuinely want to go forward, you've got to start pushing the boundaries. It's no good playing to 150 people, 200 people in your local rock club, or your local club, or your local pub, or whatever it is, and then stepping outside 60 miles or something outside of your region, and then getting disillusioned because you've only played to 2 people or nobody, because you've been booked to play some other small pub opening for someone else. This is learning curve stuff again. You have to do this stuff. There's no way you can build a following just online. You have to build it by physically being there. And, you know, again, it's part and parcel of the learning of how to do it, how to be better, how to become something that genuinely can take on the world. Because as you go forward and as you start to understand your music better, and as it becomes deeper and deeper in you, and you start to write better material, and you start to really get an understanding and people start to react to it, you will improve those things immeasurably without trying too hard, if the nuts and bolts are in place, if the rehearsals are always there, if you're doing plenty of shows, if you're pushing out through outside of your normal regional area and start to play other things. Take some chances. You know, ring promoters. Don't be afraid. Drop promoters' emails. Talk to other bands. Get to know other bands. Don't be rivals. I've never understood. This is another big mistake I think that we need to talk about. Okay, so I've heard a lot of bands say, well, rivalry's good. Rivalry is good, right? People say that. And maybe it is. I don't even know who that person was in that truck. And of course, maybe rivalry is a little bit good. You need to sort of feel that you are the best band in the world, etc. But in reality, bands can help each other. If you live in Sheffield or Nottingham or any big city or any area, potentially, doesn't matter where it is actually. If you know a lot of other bands that are all playing the same things, buddy up, go do shows together. Find ways of helping each other, because here's the thing. Being different's good. You don't have to be all the same. It's absolutely important that you have your own unique something. You know, it's not a competition. There isn't a competition. There is no bad or good. There is just different. So this brings me on to one of the biggest mistakes I think any band can make ever. And I'm probably going to finish off with this, and we'll pick this up later at another point. Bandwagon jumping will never do anything for you. There is no sense whatsoever in deciding that listening to somebody else's record and wholesale nicking their licks and their riffs is ever going to put you any further forward. It simply isn't. It might do for a little while. Why? Because it's recognisable. It's familiar, this word. You know, fans of Blackstone Cherry, if you sound like Blackstone Cherry and you go and play a gig in a classic rock club and you play something that sounds like Blackstone Cherry, inevitably, you're going to find people react to it because they find comfort in the familiar. But in terms of actually moving forward, getting the famed record deal, which these days is few and far between anyway, but moving yourself forward, that is an utterly pointless task. Bandwagon jumping does not work. The most important thing is to find your own voice, to be unique, to have something that you want to say and stand by the courage of your convictions. Take that thing and make it real. Be brave, be fearless. And I can tell you this now, you'll have people coming up to you and saying, well, that was different. If you get that, well, that was different, then you're onto something. You'll have people that'll say that you're rubbish, that you don't sound like anything that they like. This is all good stuff. This is all great stuff. Because it just means that you're ruffling the feathers. You're not doing something the same as everybody else. And that's your greatest chance of moving forward. So thank you for watching this video. If you're interested in watching more, I've got a YouTube channel, Toby Jepson Official, and also I'm on Facebook at Toby Jepson Official, and I have a website, tobyjepsonofficial.com. So if you're interested in seeing some more of this stuff, or sending me a message, or asking me a question, etc., then please feel free. And very much appreciate you taking the time to watch this. Thanks again. And by the way, again, these are all my own views. I may well be completely wrong, but I don't think I am. Thank you.